I think this is where it actually becomes tricky for parents of preteens and early adolescents, because between 10 and 13, their brain is changing just as rapidly as birth to 3. I mean, the connections, the synapses being pruned, you know, they will shift their identities, they'll shift their interests, they'll shift their fashion. It's an intense time. And I think it can often leave parents being like, almost seeing it as rebellion versus identity formation. And it can be confusing when it's like, oh, but you were into soccer. And wait, what do you mean you want to quit the soccer team? Right. So, or you've been in this drama troupe for 6 years. What do you mean? Or, you two have been best friends. Why don't you hang out anymore? Because I really like that friend's mom and we're close friends. So you have to stay close friends with this person.
Totally.
And I think one of the gifts we can give this age group is to be like radically curious throughout this transformation stage of like, oh, and to go with it, right? You have to provide the boundaries and the warmth and the structure, but also if they want to paint the room a different color, okay. Like if they want to try on, D&D or want to quit this but start this, obviously like some things you have to stick with. Like maybe you made the commitment that you paid for the class for the semester. But I feel like trying on new things and seeing what fits them is part of their job at this age.
100%.
And so, getting really curious. I describe in the book how, I have a kid who just graduated from middle school. And, during the course of those 3 years, like every single major interest from 6th grade dropped, but some really vibrant interests emerged. And that process can be like messy, but also really, really awe-inspiring to kind of be like, oh my gosh, like I'm on the front row of my kid becoming who they are and figuring that out. And I think that's where I really have I've loved this phrase radical curiosity as a parent. I was like, oh, that resonates. And I do think we often fall into this sense. I also talked to a wonderful social worker named Natalie Brunner, who's out of Louisiana, about this idea of belonging, because belonging is a major source of wonder for our kids because you want to be part of a
That's what I
group.
was going to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's that shift from younger to as we move into this kind of like preteen into teen. It was about self and self identity, and now it's who am I in this world?
Group.
Who am I? Yeah, how do I show up in this space with peers? And I think that there's a part of us as parents sometimes are like, oh, they're losing a part of themselves to belong to this group, when really maybe they're just shifting or changing or transforming. Maybe being a part of this group is something that's going to greater lift themselves, A friend of mine in another interview, Lindsay Simsek, co-author of Almost 30, and we were talking about that transition into motherhood, and she was like, a lot of people talk about what you lose and that, all the things you can't do or how things shift and change. She's like, I feel like I became just more myself in motherhood. And I think especially for our kids who are high connection seekers, we see that start to happen in droves in that like really almost as young, like 7 to 13, where they start to shift and we're like, oh my gosh, are they going to be a follower? What else is going to happen? We can spiral into like, do you know who you are and can you hang on to yourself? I think can be the fear as a parent watching it unfold and wondering like, where is there a stop to this? Do I still know you?
Yeah. And this desire to kind of pull away from parents and pull toward a peer group. I mean, that's wired. I mean, I could go into the science, but like that's wired in them. And my favorite book on this is actually a book called Popular by Mitch Prinstein. And so I re-interviewed him for this book because he really looks at kind of like the both evolutionary and biological levels of what popularity is and why it shifts, from kindness based to status based. And then hopefully for a lot of us back to kindness based. And like I think us as parents providing kind of the value framework, it's really important for us. I mean, my kids, if you ask them what does like mom care about, they are going to say, she wants me to be kind. Like, they know that. Like, they know that this is, and if they start gossiping about something at school, like, that's the thing I'm going to chime in on. But beyond that, like, this is their learning field. They're supposed to be pulling away. And that doesn't mean we don't keep those really awesome routines in for them, because those touch points, but they're going to be trying on their hats and trying these different things. And one of the things that Natalie really said to me, if you have a kid who's struggling to connect with peers, that's really painful, right? When you have a kid who desires more than anything to connect and they're not finding it. She said so often she finds that parents have a unintentionally narrow view of what social group is. And so it
Yeah.
may be, again, as you had mentioned, what you're like, okay, we do town soccer because that's what we've always done. And my dad coached it. And she said, it might be that, but it might be the live action role playing. They might find their people there. They might find it at robotics camp. They might find it in, a band. They might find it in working with younger kids. They might find it in something with service. There are just so many different ways. And I really believe that if you put yourself out there and focus on what you love, you're going to find people.